another occasion, I'm feeling pretty good about life. He said that in December 2007 at a press conference. Now here's someone whose war has cost this country over $1 trillion so far with no end in sight, virtually destroyed an entire country, the country of Iraq, and most importantly by far, and it bears repeating, criminally responsible for over 100,000 precious human beings being in their graves, decomposing right now as I'm talking to you. And he says he's feeling pretty good about life? It's too unbelievable for words. It's too unbelievable for words. I'm telling you, this is a happy man. He's happy. I don't think he's lost a wink of sleep over this war. As recently as March of this year, he shows up at a press conference to endorse McCain's candidacy. McCain shows up late. What does Bush do? Spontaneously, with a big smile on his face, he starts doing a soft shoe tap dancing routine to entertain the assembled media. Back in 2005, Mark McKinnon, a bicycling friend of Bush, told the New York Times, "I've never seen the president more calm, relaxed, and happy." All these horrors are going, he's happy. And I say this, even if George Bush was only guilty of making an innocent mistake and taking this nation to war in Iraq, not murder, as I firmly believe, with all of the death, the horror, and the suffering he has caused, what type of a monstrous individual is it? What type of a human monster is it who could be happy with his life? And that's provided the emotional underpinning that took this case, where I would already seek the death penalty, to a higher level and made it very, very personal with me. Okay, let's open up to questions and answers now. The question is, when we're talking about complicity for murder, what involvement what complicity would there be for the media that knowingly helped George Bush take the nation to war in a lie? Do you have evidence that they knowingly took this nation to war in a lie? They helped him? I just mentioned, by the way, these two documents that, to my knowledge, have never appeared before in any major newspaper or magazine in America. Now, you can accuse the media of being ignorant and stupid and extremely spineless, but now you're taking it to a different level and you're saying they're in bed with him knowing that he's taken the nation to war in a lie. If that's true, then they're guilty, but I don't have evidence of what you're suggesting.
What about not seeing the caskets come back?
Okay, well that's, yeah, well, but the murder's already been committed. He says after they found out, they're still not doing anything to George Bush. No, I don't find any criminal complicity there. He's asked a very good question. Can Bush pardon himself? And I don't know the answer to that question. Under the Constitution, Bush can pardon anyone he wants who's committed a crime, which would include Rice and Cheney. The Constitution is silent on the issue of whether he can pardon himself. There's no precedent for it, but I can tell you that it's the overwhelming consensus of constitutional scholars that he cannot pardon himself. But there's no precedent, legal precedent, one way or the other on it. But scholars have weighed in on this issue, and it would just be totally violative of everything that America stands for someone to commit a crime and pardon himself. You follow? But the Constitution is silent on that issue. An excellent question. But I do want to read something to you. And I could utter the words, but I think I said it maybe better in the book, about asking for the death penalty against George Bush. I write in a footnote, page 85, indeed, Bush himself, ironically, would be the last person who would quarrel with the proposition that being guilty of mass murder, even one murder by his lights, unquote, calls for the death penalty as opposed to life imprisonment. As governor of Texas, Bush had the highest execution rate of any governor in American history. He was a very strong proponent of the death penalty, who even laughingly mocked a condemned young woman who begged him to spare her life. Quote, "Please don't kill me," unquote. Bush mimicked her in a magazine interview with journalist Tucker Carlson. And he even refused to commute the sentence of death down to life imprisonment for a young man who was mentally retarded. Although as president, he set aside the entire prison sentence of his friend Louis Scooter Libby and had a broad smile on his face when he announced in his second presidential debate with Al Gore that his state, Texas, was about to execute 3 convicted murderers. But I want you to listen to this. In Bush's 2 terms as Texas governor, he signed death warrants for an incredible 152 out of 153 executions against convicted murders, the majority of whom only killed 1 single person. The only death sentence Bush commuted was for one of the many murders that mass murderer Henry Lucas had been convicted of. Bush was informed that Lucas had falsely confessed to this particular murder and was innocent, his conviction being improper. So in 152 out of 152 cases, Bush refused to show mercy even once, finding that not one of the 152 convicted killers should receive life imprisonment instead of the death penalty. His perfect 100% execution rate is highly uncommon, even for the most conservative law and order governors. I only mention that because obviously, if I were the prosecutor, there's no question I would seek the death penalty against him, and he could hardly complain about that. Here's a guy who loves the death penalty, apparently, for other people. Let's see if he has a smile on his face when he learns that he may end up on death row. What can you do to help? Well, I already know because I'm getting letters from people around the country who have read the book. And they're saying they're getting a copy, they agree with what I'm saying, and they're sending it to the local DA or the state attorney general asking them to prosecute George Bush for murder. I sent out 50 copies of the book to the state attorney general throughout the country with a cover letter from me asking them to read the book, and if they agree that the evidence of Bush's guilt is clear and there's jurisdiction to proceed, I've offered my services to help in any way they see fit, which would range all the way from being a consultant up to and including being appointed a special prosecutor. I've just learned a couple days ago that there are 2,000, more than I thought, 2,700 district attorneys in counties within those states. And I'm going to get the list, and I'm going to start reaching out to all of them. I'm looking for a courageous prosecutor somewhere in America to step forward and say, hey, this is the United States of America. No man is above the law. The evidence of guilt is clear, so I'm going to go after George Bush. Remember now, there's no statute of limitations for the crime of murder. Pinochet down in Chile, 33 years later, they brought murder charges against him, and then he aborted the prosecution. He died. But people already are reaching out to local DAs around the country, and I've got to think there's some courageous prosecutor out there, out of close to 3,000, who's willing to take on George Bush. But I can tell you this, there's a lot of fear in America because of the right wing. I didn't tell you that this book first came out totally blacked out by the mainstream media, totally. No network, no cable, no newspaper reviewed the book, nothing at all. It got so bad that the publisher, that ABC Radio, turned down money from my publisher to take out a radio spot on ABC network. Nonetheless, because of folks like you and word of mouth, it's a bestseller. New York Times, this coming Sunday, it's number 10 on the New York Times bestseller. So it is selling, but no thanks to the mainstream media because they're terrified of the right wing in this country. I want to thank you all so much for listening today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.